Hello, YouTube divers. This is WaterDive 122, and I want to welcome you all to another episode of Magic Metal Mondays. Today, we are going to be reviewing another Savatage album. We are going to be talking about the 1994 album Handful of Rain. Handful of Rain is, in my opinion, Savatage's most underrated album. It is just, I love that album. I know a lot of Savatage fans tend to give this album some flack, especially fans of the John Oliva era and maybe Edge of Thorns as well. But I do have to say this album is freaking amazing, and it is heavily underrated. I personally think it's one of Savatage's, if not the most underrated album Savatage ever released. It is so freaking amazing. It's a wonderful album. I'm going to get to that in the review. So before we get into the review, we're going to do a little bit of history about this record. So this album came out in 1994, a year after the tragic death of guitarist Chris Oliva. Of course, a lot of Savatage fans know that he tragically passed away in a car accident in 1993, shortly after the band had released Edge of Thorns, I believe, yeah. It's such a loss, not just for Savatage, not just for the metal community, but also for just the music world in general. He's in my opinion one of my favorite guitar players, and yeah, this is just that was just a horrible loss for Savatage. But with that, Savatage did get a new guitar player, Alex Skolnick, who, if you are familiar with the band Testament, you would know this dude. He played with Testament basically every album up to this point. And John Oliva makes his return to Savatage, because on the previous album, Edge of Thorns, Oliva was absent because he wanted to focus on other stuff. But now he returned, but not as a singer. He returned as an instrumentalist. He plays basically every instrument on this album except for lead guitars and lead vocals. He does some rhythm vocals and rhythm guitar. He plays bass, he plays keyboards, and he even plays drums on this album. But until, when Savatage went out on tour, I guess Johnny Lee Middleton rejoined the band, and either Jeff Plate or Steve Wacholtz rejoined the band. I think it was Jeff Plate, but I could be wrong. So it was really just Zachary Stevens, Alex Skolnick, and John Oliva, who were the masterminds behind this album, and all three of them do an amazing job on here holding down the fort. Now, before we get into the tracks, I'm going to basically describe this album's atmosphere. So, Handful of Rain is basically a very dark, heavy, almost like grieving type of an album from Savatage. Because as I've already mentioned, Chris Oliva passed away the year before. And in my opinion, this album basically showcases Savatage's grief of the loss of Chris Oliva, especially on a few songs on this record. I'm going to get to that in the review, which starts right now. So, here we go. This is the track-by-track review. So, this album has 10 songs, as does a lot of their albums, but this album has 10 songs. Each of them range from good to masterpieces. So, let's not waste any more time. Let's talk about the tracks. So the opening track is Taunting Cobras, and this is a really freaking amazing opener. This is probably one of my favorite Savatage openers. It is that riff before the chorus is just so heavy. That I'm talking about that chromatic riff that Alex Skolnick does on the guitar, and Zachary Stevens' vocals complements that riff to the fullest extent. It's one of my favorite moments on this album, and it's just so freaking heavy. it's an amazing song. It's one of my favorite songs off this album. Track number 2 is the title track, Handful of Rain. And this is basically a good combination of a heavy rocker and a ballad. This basically uses like a lot of altering in terms of musical mood. Like one part it is ballady, it has like acoustic guitars with nylon strings. That's usually not common in rock and metal, but they use nylon strings here for the acoustic set on this song, and it's so punchy. It's as if those strings were meant to be on that song. It's amazing. And so yeah, one part feels like it's a ballad, and then another part, specifically the chorus, it's so heavy hitting. It just makes you want to thrash along with the band. It's just so it's so good. I love the title track, Handful of Rain. It's an amazing song. Track number 3, now we got a little bit of a mini epic here. A song called Chance. And Chance is a really, really good track. This is basically the perfect balance. This is basically a perfect mini epic, if you will. It's about 8 minutes long, but not a single second is wasted. I absolutely love that track. Especially that part near the end where Zachary Stevens does like some vocal looping, where he sings like different parts and he keeps looping them, and then there's this big symphony of sound where Zachary Stevens is just belting out the word chance, and it's so heavy hitting. And in my opinion, it's a very, very great way to end a song. Now moving on to track number 4, Stare Into the Sun. In my opinion, this is the weakest song on the album, or at least it's the least memorable to me. Like, returning to this record, I didn't even know this song even existed. I didn't even remember if this song existed or not. This is, in my opinion, a very like a forgettable type of track, but it's still pretty good nonetheless. Zachary Stevens smokes it on that song, as does Alex Skolnick. But when it comes to memorability, it's probably the weakest track on the album. And now we come into my favorite song on the album, Castles Burning. And I mentioned before we got into the track-by-track review that the Handful of Rain is a very dark and heavy and almost to the point of a grief-like album. Castles Burning is one example of that type of song. It's dark, it's heavy, and it feels like the band is grieving the loss of Chris Oliva. Castles Burning is an amazing, amazing track. It is a power ballad-ish, and oh my god, Zachary Stevens. I would probably have to say that Castles Burning is my favorite Zachary Stevens era song, mainly because of the vocal performances from Zachary Stevens. He just sounds great on that song, and I sing along to that song any chance I get. I love Castles Burning, and in my opinion, this really showcases the band grieving the loss of Chris Oliva. It's just one of those songs where it just hits you in the face. It's just so good. Next up, we have a 1.5 minute long instrumental, Visions. Visions is another really, really freaking good track. It's an instrumental that kind of serves as an interlude. And and I've said this before, talking about Hall of the Mountain King, a lot of Savatage's albums have dedicated instrumental interludes. That way you can, get some. That way you're ready to continue on the second side, which, in my opinion, is a very genius way to make a record. Do do a few consecutive songs on the first side, then do a little interluding instrumental midway through, and then just continue on the second side. It's just, I love that so much, and I wish more bands did that. But as of right now, Savatage is the only band that does that, so there you go. Then we get into the second side of the album. The second side is just so freaking amazing. I do have to say that this is probably the heaviest side of this album, but it's still great nonetheless. So, track number 7 is Watching You Fall, and this is probably my second favorite song off the album behind Castles Burning. Oh, Watching You Fall is really heavy. I mean, it's not as heavy as Taunting Cobras, but oh my god, it is up there. Oh my goodness. Especially that part near the end of the chorus where Zachary Stevens keeps repeating the words watching you fall. Like, watching you, watching you, watching you fall. Yeah, I love that part, and it's what makes this song my second favorite song off of this album. It's just an amazing song. Then you follow that up with the super heavy song, Nothing's Going On. Oh my goodness. This is probably the heaviest song on the album. Especially that part, especially that riff in the chorus that goes, nothing's going on, nothing's going on. I can't do Alex Skolnick's guitar work, but you know, if you don't believe me, go listen to that song. Yeah, Nothing's Going On is an amazing, amazing song. I love that song. Now we're moving on to the next song on here, Symmetry. Symmetry is definitely the weakest song on the second side of this album, and it's probably the second most forgettable song on here, only in front of Staring to the Sun. I mean, it's an okay song. It's not terrible. It's just okay, nothing really special. But it's still a pretty good track. And then the album closes off with Alone You Breathe, which is a 7.5-minute ballad. And this kind of brings back memories of how the Streets record ended. Because on their 1991 album Streets, a rock opera, they also had a closing ballad, Believe. And on Alone You Breathe, they basically throw in the chorus from the closer from the Streets record, and they pull in certain references to that song. And in my opinion, this is the song that was dedicated to Chris Oliva. I guarantee you this was the song that was dedicated to Chris Oliva. It's just so great. It's just so lighthearted. It's so Savatage. And if this really was a song that was dedicated to Chris Oliva, I'd say Savatage absolutely nailed it. Of course, my favorite part in there was when they basically repeated the chorus from the song Believe from the Streets record. Like, I am the night, I am the wake, I am the light, I am the dark inside the night, I hear your hopes, I feel your dreams, and in the dark I hear your screams. I love that chorus. It is definitely a signature thought whenever I think of Savatage. I always think of that line from Believe and Alone You Breathe. I just love that line. And like I've said numerous times, I really think Alone You Breathe was a Chris Oliva dedication. And like I said, I think Savatage absolutely nailed it. And that's how Handful of Rain ends. And add it all up, and you got a solid 9 out of 10 album. The only reason why I'm giving it a 9 and not a solid 10 out of 10 is because of Stare Into the Sun. Stare Into the Sun is really, in my opinion, the one track that I feel like this album could do without. maybe Symmetry as well. Like if they were on like Wake of Magellan or Poets and Madmen, then chances are they probably would have been more memorable songs to me. But they're on this album, and yes, they're good. Don't get me wrong, but they're just not as good as the rest of the songs. And so for that reason, I can't give this album a perfect score, but a 9 out of 10 is still an amazing score nonetheless. Like I've said numerous times, I love this album, and it is definitely one of the many albums I am going to get back to when I decide to re-listen to Savatage's discography again. Because my oh my, what a heck of a ride that was. So with that said, thank you so much for watching, my fellow YouTube divers. This is WaterDive 122 signing out, ready to dive into more fun on YouTube. Thanks for watching.